When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Wicker. User, Nested Air. Posted, June 2nd, 1998.
Almost every family has an heirloom of some kind. It would be a sweeping generalization to say it's almost always jewelry, but I also don't think that's far from the mark. Jewelry, if it's not the fake glass kind my Aunt Wendy likes to buy from QVC, carries obvious value simply by virtue of being what it is. Precious metals and shining stones mashed together like Waffle House hash browns. When times are good, you wear it to remind yourself of great-grandma and to signify to everyone else that at some point along the way, your family had money. When times are hard, those stick pins and brooches are a lot easier to hide than gold bars or a stained glass mural. In my family, we don't pass along precious metals, shiny stones, or ornamental glass, stained or otherwise. In our family, we pass along wicker. Not wicker, the concept, you understand. People have been weaving branches together since long before the Byrne clan assembled itself out of the collective genetic pool of Ireland. No, our wicker is a person, or at least the figure of one, made of dried willow boughs and crafted to look as if it was sitting at rest. According to family lore, wicker was modeled on an ancestor from the old country more than 200 years ago, though no one could agree on whether it has been a man or a woman. The figure was slight enough to pass for either. It was meant to be a guardian, I was told, a good luck charm to watch over our family down through generations. While for most of my childhood I couldn't say whether or not wicker had done much guarding, I could say without reservation that it freaked me the hell out. Its permanent residence was in a rocking chair at our grandparents' lakeside home, which they'd named Tara. Every time we visited, I'd try to avoid Wicker's faceless gaze staring out from the sunroom. "You needn't be afraid of Wicker, my love," is what my gran would always say. She took tea in the sunroom with it every day, chatting away to it like they were old friends. Wicker is family, the same as your grandfather or me or your mother. As long as it's here, we never have to fear misfortune brought on by others. It's very old magic. She'd wink at me then, and I was never sure if she was having me on or not. The Byrne women can be enigmatic like that. Our people had lived in Bridgewater since bringing Wicker with them to the New World just before the turn of the century. Having lakeside house money came much later, and though it was more down to canny financial management than actual wealth, people around town liked to talk about us as if we were spending weekends at Hyannisport and not Eastlake. Looking back, I'm surprised someone didn't try to rob us sooner. My twin sister Alice and I had just had our 12th birthday party a week before. Usually how it went is we'd have a big party with our friends on the actual day, then the following weekend, our grandma would make us a big dinner with as many of our favorite foods as she could. That year, we sat down to a feast of stew with dumplings, my favorite, and hand-breaded chicken strips, always Alice's choice, along with a variety of sides like garlic knots and maple bacon beans. It was cheap, cheerful food made with love. Steam from a day's worth of cooking had fogged over the picture windows looking out toward the lake, giving the kitchen and dining room a warm, cozy feeling. Granddad was sitting at the head of the table, Grandma at the foot, same as it ever was. Even the vague, menacing presence of Wicker, seated in a darkened corner of the sunroom, barely visible through the open door behind Grandpa, couldn't puncture the perfection of that moment. We had just finished saying grace when a crunching came from around the corner in the foyer, followed by the splintering of wood. Muffled voices were audible now, too, talking excitedly over one another in short, sharp sentences. Grandpa told us to stay where we were and stood just as we heard a massive impact smash the front door wide open, letting cold air flood in. Alice screamed at the sudden noise, and that was like a starter pistol announcing chaos. Voices were now audible from around the corner, most loudly a man saying, "They're in the kitchen." Footsteps rushed toward us, and soon 2 large men in bulky winter coats and ski masks were blocking the kitchen doorway. Grandpa didn't give an inch, stepping straight at them. "Now who in the hell do you think you are?" The man on the left cut him off with a single jab to the face, smashing Grandpa's nose and sending him to the ground in a bloody heap. Now, it was Grandma who was screaming. She stood up and ran toward her husband, only to be blocked by the one on the right, a fat man whose coat was hanging open, revealing a stained Celtics t-shirt. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against him as she struggled. Alice climbed under the table and crawled to me, clutching my leg. The man who'd punched Grandpa stabbed a finger in her direction. He was tall and thin, and I could see greasy blonde curls spilling out from under his mask. "Sit the fuck down, old lady. If you don't, I swear to God, I'll stomp his fucking brains into pudding. Look into my eyes and see that I'm serious." Grandma stopped squirming instantly, going limp in the fat man's grip. Curly smiled. "Good girl. Now that I know you can listen, this should be easy. All you have to do is give us the cash and jewelry and we'll be on our way. But if you fuck around, I'll kill this wrinkly fuck here." He kicked Grandpa in the side, forcing a groan out of him. "Then the kids, and make you watch all of it. Then I'll cut your throat and take your shit anyways." "We don't have anything of value," my grandpa moaned from the floor. Curly kicked him in the belly again, so hard I had to look away. Curly dropped to one knee, leaning down further so he was level with Grandpa's face, taking a handful of his thick, white hair. "Don't fucking lie to me, you rich piece of shit. I hear what they say about you in town, that you sit here in this fucking dump on the hill counting your money, looking down your noses at us. How long have you parasites even been in town anyways, sucking the life out of us? Fuck you. The way I see it, you owe us back rent." Their heads were inches apart. Grandpa spat a mouthful of blood straight into Curly's eyes. The younger man released his grip, screaming obscenities as he ripped off his ski mask, using it to wipe his face. He was thin and ratty, a patchy mustache across his upper lip. His hair was as greasy as it had looked from under the mask, hanging limply down to his shoulders. Grandpa laughed weakly from the floor, sending Curly over the edge. He charged back in with murder in his eyes, stopping only when Grandma gave out a blood-curdling shriek. "Okay," she screamed. "We'll give you everything. We do have cash, we do. Just don't hurt him. Please don't hurt him. Please." Fatso laughed. "What do you know? We found the combination in the safe." Curly sneered at Grandpa, eyes on him as he spoke to my grandmother. "You better fucking hope there's enough in there to make this worth our time, bitch." "There is. I swear there is. It's in the sunroom. I'll show you." He nodded at Fatso, who released Grandma. "Where's the sunroom?" She pointed behind him through the open door across the hallway. "In there." Curly jerked his head in that direction. "You first. Don't try anything stupid, or so help me God, I'll beat him to death right in front of you. Do you understand me?" Grandma nodded, shaking. "Out loud, bitch. Do you understand me?" "Yes," she sobbed. "Yes, I understand you." He flashed a cruel grin. "Good. Now that we understand each other, after you." Curly beckoned toward the open door. "Lowell, you stay here and watch him. If the old man tries anything, kill him." Fatso nodded eagerly. "My pleasure." Grandma walked toward the kitchen door, looking down toward Grandpa, then us, her face pained. "It's gonna be okay. Don't you worry. This will all be over soon." Curly snorted and pushed her ahead of him across the hallway into the lightless sunroom. From somewhere in the dark, I heard him say, "Where's the fucking light switch?" just as the door slammed shut behind them. There was a flurry of noise, like 1,000 dry branches snapping. Curly's voice came again, this time high and panicked. "What the fuck? What the fuck is—" He was cut off by another sound, something wet and soft, like grapefruits being dropped onto concrete from a great height. Fatso whirled toward the closed door. Ryan, what's happening?" No words came back, just an oily gurgling that turned my stomach. He pointed his knife toward us, edging toward the kitchen door. "Don't you fucking move." Fatso stepped into the hall and ripped open the sunroom door. In a flash, he too was pulled inside, the door slamming shut behind him. His screams were almost enough to drown out the staccato cracking of dry wood until both stopped abruptly. This time, it could have been watermelon smashing open, juice and pulp exploding thickly. After that came a long silence. No, that's not quite right. I could hear Grandma's talking, but calmer now. She said something that sounded like many blessings, followed by thank you. When she opened the door, her face was as calm as if she'd just come back from the hair salon. Alice and I had been stunned into silence by the whole thing and clung to each other for comfort. Grandma went to Grandpa first, gently caressing his face. They spoke intently under their breath, eyes never once leaving each other until they were done. Grandma then turned to us, saying it would be all right, that the men had gone. I was to use the kitchen phone to call Mary O'Connell, their closest neighbor and a retired physician. "Tell her there's been trouble," Grandma said pointedly, "but that it's over now and your grandfather's nose is broken. He might also have internal injuries. She'll know what to do." Indeed, she did, turning up only 10 minutes later, a slim, silver-haired woman carrying a medical bag. While she evaluated my grandfather in the living room, Grandma led Alice and I by the hand into the hallway. "Children," she started, "you were brave tonight, and I'm proud of you." Alice's eyes were wide. She wasn't showing it, but I knew she was still terrified. Grandma she asked. "Are the men going to come back?" Her grandmother's face softened and she embraced my sister. No, love. They're gone. Wicker protected us." I looked up at her in bafflement. Wicker? What did a doll have to do with the noises I'd heard? She looked down at me and nodded knowingly. "I understand your doubt. You two are only small and have never needed Wicker before. Come, I want to show you something. But first, you have to close your eyes until I tell you. It's very important. Otherwise, you will see things you shouldn't. Protecting our family can be a messy business, do you understand?" Too stunned by the night's events to disagree with anything we were told at this point, Alice and I nodded. Together, we closed our eyes and I felt our grandmother's smooth, cool hand take mine. She led us into the sunroom through an earthy, coppery odor I couldn't recognize. 10 steps later, and it had diminished. 10 more, and I could barely smell it at all. Another 10 before Grandma spoke again. "You may open your eyes, but only to look forward." I did exactly that, to find myself standing before Wicker, sitting in its chair, same as always. "Say thank you for protecting us, Wicker. Many blessings to our ancestors. We must always show gratitude when blessings are rendered." Solemnly, we repeated the words. As we did, I was certain I saw, if only for a moment, curly blonde hairs woven among the willows being quickly drawn inward until they disappeared.
Subject: Blue Fire. User: Garzaxith. Posted October 2nd, 1999.
The day that led up to my flight was about as normal as you can expect flying out of O'Hare. The security guys running the metal detector were miserable, and my departing gate changed a half dozen times, sending me back and forth across the terminal until my feet ached. There was some weird neon lighting, I guess, though that was just a psychedelic art installation thing above the rolling walkways. With how dim the lighting in the rest of the place was more than anything, those multicolored tubes reminded me of a brain firing off its last few neurons before shutting down forever. Cheery thoughts, I know, but if you've ever flown out of there in winter, you'll understand. It's a habit of mine to always book aisle seats. I like the legroom, and sometimes even on busy routes like this one, you got lucky and no one booked the middle. Who doesn't like a little elbow room, right? On that particular flight, my hopes for having the next seat over empty were dashed when a young kid, maybe 20, asked me to get up so he could scooch in. I remember he was wearing a green and white striped polo, and the woman in the window seat had a red tee. As we began our ascent, my stomach began to knot up in a way it never had before. Imagine someone wringing your intestines like they were a sopping dish towel. Sweat poured from me. I wasn't sure if I was going to vomit, shit my pants, or both. The second we hit cruising altitude, I ripped off my seatbelt and beelined it to the rear of the plane. Seconds later, I was on that toilet, pants around my ankles, waiting for an apocalypse, and nothing happened. All that cramping and sweating had stopped as quickly as they'd come. Fully 10 minutes I sat there trying to coax out whatever horrors had been thrashing around in my abdomen, and the only thing that happened was my legs started to tingle. Whatever the issue had been, it seemed well and truly gone. After pulling my pants back up, I checked myself out in the mirror. Aside from the sweat stains darkening my armpits and my hair looking like I just stepped out of a sauna, everything was normal. I felt normal too, bafflingly so. There wasn't even phantom pain like sometimes happens after moments of intense agony where you feel it lurking at the edges of your awareness, looking for a way back in. I turned the taps on to wash my hands and normalcy ended. Rather than pour out from the faucet, water bubbled out the way it did in videos of astronauts I'd seen on the news. Clear, marble-sized balls of water were floating past my face, gently splattering against the bathroom ceiling. I stumbled back, more in surprise than fear, colliding with the bathroom wall. Unable to tear my eyes away from the sink, I fumbled blindly with one hand for the door latch, pushing it open hurriedly. The whole while, water continued to burble slowly upward. I needed someone else to see this too, to make sure I wasn't going insane. I practically threw myself out of the tiny cubicle, finding a totally new problem awaiting me. Blue fire filled the entire cabin, washing like a wave over row after row of passengers. The few people I could see were slumped over to one side as if they were sleeping completely unharmed. The flowing flames cast a soft glow across the overhead luggage bins, almost as ethereal as it was terrifying. I stood, rooted to the spot, trying to make sense of it all. I'd flown through lightning storms before, and it hadn't looked like this. Somewhere in my overheated mind, I became aware of another wrinkle. It was totally silent. No engine noise, no propellers, no nothing. You could have heard a pin drop. The fire hit the bulkhead at the front of the plane, ripping like water before reversing course toward the rear of the plane and me. Instinctively, I stepped back, bumping hard into something which hadn't been there a moment before. I whirled around, coming face to face with what I could only describe as a man-sized insect, having a triangular head and bulging green eyes. I let out a shocked scream, and the bug flinched. It slowly raised one of its forelegs, which was enough to send me running the other direction, my panic-fogged brain completely forgetting about the coming wave. I never saw it hit. Instead, I was suddenly floating, all fear and excitement drifting away from me like mist disappearing in morning light. I felt weightless, turning over and over like a leaf on the breeze. With some amusement, I noticed all the other passengers were nude. It all seemed so absurd, I couldn't help but giggle. My insect friend, accompanied by 3 more who looked just like him, followed me up the aisle as I was borne back toward my seat and carefully put down. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't afraid of anything. The heavy point of my friend's serrated foreleg gently traced down the side of my face, feeling more than anything like the caress of an old friend after too much time apart. The touch conjured memories I'd long forgotten. Warm afternoons on my grandparents' patio, the summer breeze rich with the vanilla scent of clematis. I could hear the creak of their porch swing where my grandfather was napping. When he woke, we'd steal away down the hill for ice cream, knowing full well my grandmother would scold him for it when we got back. I was happier than I could remember being in a very long time. I awoke to an announcement from the flight deck. We'd be landing in Miami shortly. For the briefest of moments, a sense of unreality tugged at me, a feeling of being in 3 places at once. Then, it was gone. I shook my head and looked around. No fire, no insects. I breathed a sigh of relief. The young man in the seat next to me was leafing through the in-flight magazine, not paying any attention to the captain's voice. The woman beside him was gazing out the cabin window. Everything as it should be. Everything, I realized, except for their shirts. The sleeping woman wore his white and green polo. He had on her red t-shirt, like they'd been hastily redressed by someone who wasn't paying as much attention as they should. Someone who'd been interrupted. Neither of my seatmates seemed aware of the change. I certainly wasn't going to tell them.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.